Okay, so let's get into it. Today's video, I'm going to focus on this little patch here. You can see it's very small, very fiddly, lots of little angles, and it's going to be a bit of a nightmare. And today I'm going to show you the best tips for getting this sorted, or anything in its same situation really. Anything that's going to look like it's going to be a bit of trouble. And the first thing I do, especially when I'm dealing where this is basically a slope that's leading to a flat ceiling. With any slopes or anything like that, I always run a string line. Actually, anywhere where there's a bit of an angle that you need to put in yourself with the plaster. This way, you know that you've got a line to follow. You know you've got a straight line. You can use that as a guide when you're applying your plaster. And you know that when you're doing it, you're not just going to focus and try and get it right with your eye, because it'll never happen. You need a guide. It's like tracing, do you know what I mean? As a kid when you're drawing and that, drawing the lines. That's what you got to do. And what I'm doing here with my trowel is using the edge of my trowel to run it along the plasterboard and find a point where the end point will meet. So when it comes to plastering, I've got a line that'll finish in the right place. So all you do then is hold it tight and then flick your chalk line when you're happy. Run it through and see where it sits. But this way you know you've got a straight line that you can work with. That's a great little tip there, and one I always use. Tip number 2, make sure you've got the right tools. I've got a short array of tools here that I use for the job. I've got my 2 trowels, different sizes. I've got my 14 inch, got 13 inch, and I've got a pointing trowel here. This is crucial. You need one of these in your bag. They always come in handy. A little margin trowel, again, you need them. And then I've got a tiny little 6-inch trowel there. You'll also need one of these. And you should have a set of these, at least one of each in your plastering bag, because they'll save your life. You always need it. You'll always need it when it comes to plastering small areas like this. So that's that. Tip number 3 is it's all about control really, especially when you're dealing with little areas like this. It all comes down to how well you can control your trowel, how steady your hand is as well. And unfortunately, a lot of this just comes with practice, but a big tip is to take your time. Look, I'm trying to follow in the line. You won't be able to see the line on this video, but I can see it very clearly when I'm up there. I'm just taking my time. Don't rush it. Make sure you've got a nice amount of pressure when you're using your trowel, and use the tools you feel comfortable with using. Again, this comes back to tip number 2 with using the correct tools. Only use tools you're comfortable with and that you've had a sense of using before. And that way, when it comes to these fiddly little jobs, you'll be confident in using it because you've got a tool that you're used to using. Don't switch it up. Don't get a new trowel just because it looks good. If you've got one that works, use it. And as you can see here, I've got a little tricky area to deal with. I actually applied that with my midget trowel, but I'll show you on a clip like that and later on in the tips. But again, this comes down to control, where you can use every part of the trowel to apply the plaster. And again, it's just one of them things which comes with time, unfortunately. But the more you practice, and even though these walls are a nightmare at the time, they do make you a better plasterer. So don't shy away from them. Strive to find them really. Again, just taking your time. As you can, I'm just trying to perfect that line now. Because as a plasterer, one of the things again you'll be criticised on is the line between your ceiling to your normal flat ceiling. You want to make sure every line is completely straight, and within human error at least. So that's what you've got to do with control. Try and get the best out of that, and that leads on nicely to getting the most from your tools. And I've cheesily called it tool mastery, but basically what I'm trying to get at is just being able to use every part of the trowel. I'm just using it typically now, but there's a tight corner, so now I'm going to be focused on using the very edge of my trowel there, and then I'm using the head of it as well. You've got to be able to use every part of your trowel, and again, that comes with the control. That follows on nicely from the previous tip. But you've just got to be able to use every part of it, because when you come to, I've got 3 angles leading to a steep point here. You've got to be able to use, like this, I'm using the very edge of my trowel. Don't be scared of using parts of the trowel that you won't think you'd be used before. You've got to really take hold of that trowel and use every part of it. So look, again, digging in the very edge of it to make sure I get the plaster in that very tip of the corner. And just practice, practice using it, practice doing these little things. Here's another good trick. To get your nice, clean, crisp corners there to an existing wall, Take the plaster off with the head of your trowel. Again, we're using every part of the trowel. And just tip the top left corner. Put all the pressure in your trowel and run it down the line. That'll push all the plaster into that gap, and it'll give you a nice crisp angle there. That's what we want. That's what gives us plasterers a good name. It's nice crisp angles, and you know, if we keep constantly leaving them, then people will realise. Again, I'm doing it on the angle leading to the wall here. Push the edge of your trowel in nice and tight to that hard wall there, and just put as much pressure in as you can to make sure you're getting it right. And here again, here's a little midget trowel. I must admit, they are awful to use generally. They never really come nicely made, but you've just got to get used to the one you've had. I've had this for about 3 years now, and you can eventually break them in. Tip number 6 then, always clean your edges. Always clean your edges. Again, using the head of your trowel, so referring back to the last tip, use every part of your trowel, and you just literally just chip away at the old plaster and just try and get rid of it. Again, using the edge of your trowel to clean the edges up again, but you just want to always clean your edges. You don't want any plaster left on the wall next to you, and it just makes your life so much easier. The earlier you get this, the better. I often try and do it after the closing in stage. So on my first trowel, I often try and clean away any excess plaster or get rid of anything that might cause a bit of trouble in the future. So the earlier you clean your edges up, the better for you. It'll just make your life 10 times easier. And it leads to a more professional finish, because you're in full control of the job, and your angles will always look nice and clean due to that little fact that your edges have been scraped at the beginning and you got it well under control at the early stages of plastering. You know, that's real control in a plasterer. Tip number 7 is all about patience. You can only get your plaster flat when it's dried. This stage, we're very far into the drying process now, and this is when you'll start getting that smooth finish with your pointing trowel. You won't really get it before that, because again, with practice, you will get used to this trowel, but they are tricky to use. To get that point on the edge, it's quite hard. So it all comes with timings. Just be patient with your work. Keep chipping away, and the way you'll get these angles and the way you'll get these little areas perfect is by letting your plaster set, and then you can start tackling the smoothing stage. And use your pointing trowel to really clean your edges up. What I'm doing there, this takes patience, is trying to get any excess plaster that's making that line look wavy. I'm just trying to clean that line right up, and that's so I'm actually cutting away any plaster that's leading on the other wall, just making sure it looks bang on. And again, this is the final stage. It's all down to the patience. I've got my little plastic trowel out. It's a flexi trowel, brilliant one to use, just to really finish the job off. And especially when you've got awkward angles, because these trowels are so flexible, they'll just fit in any gap. They'll squeeze around any curves. If you've got any curved walls, these are ideal for it as well, because they'll just follow the contours of any shape, anything really. So I definitely recommend getting a flexi trowel, especially a plastic one like this. This is my little bonus tip, because these trowels are unbelievable, especially when you've got awkward angles like this. And if there is any rough patches that you haven't managed to get out, then these will always soften it a bit more. I mean, ideally we want to make sure that, you know, the wall's completely smooth no matter what angles you're dealing with, but if you are struggling, these plastic trowels will always come to help you out. So that's it. That's my tips for dealing with awkward small plastering areas. If you want more tips and tricks, join our welcome course from Plastering For Beginners. Completely free. We'll go through the whole process of plastering, show you how to mix it, how to apply it, how to plaster your walls, and we'll show you how to get a nice finish. Again, completely free. So feel free to join that. And if you like this video, please like it. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe to our channel, because we'd really appreciate you being on board and getting involved with us. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.